What's up, everyone? Today I wanted to talk about localization. Too oftentimes when the translation versus localization debate comes up among anime fans, people always frame it in terms of how Japanese stuff is translated or localized into English. However, people don't often look at the reverse of that, how English stuff is translated or localized into Japanese. So I'm going to go over a few American movie titles and how they were translated or localized into Japanese, explain why that is, and hopefully open your eyes to the idea of localization and that it is not the boogeyman that you think it is. So Japanese people do know a lot of English vocabulary, and it's no secret that these movies are American movies in English. So sometimes the movie titles are not translated at all into Japanese, and they are just left alone in English but spelled out in katakana. Titles like American Pie, American Pie, or Stand By Me, or Pretty Woman. And sometimes the titles of the movies are literally translated into Japanese, like The 40-Year-Old Virgin became 40歳の童貞男. Now they did add a little more information to the virgin by adding otoko or o at the end, which changes it into the 40-year-old male virgin versus just the 40-year-old virgin, but they kept that title the same. But the following is a few titles that were completely changed or localized to appeal to a Japanese audience. So I'm going to give you guys the English translations of the Japanese versions of these English movie titles, and I'm going to see if you can guess them. And then I'll tell you what it really is, and then we'll go over it. Movie number 1, A Cuck's Love Vacation. That movie is Forgetting Sarah Marshall. So if you have seen the movie Forgetting Sarah Marshall, you'll know that it is about a man who finds out that his girlfriend was cheating on him, and he goes on this vacation, this like Under the Tuscan Sun style thing, but it's a man instead of a woman, and he finds new love, rediscovers himself, etc. So the Japanese title of that movie is actually closer to what the movie is about. Now the overarching theme of the movie is, yeah, getting over Sarah Marshall, his ex-girlfriend. And if the movie title had been translated into Japanese literally, it would have been something more like Sarah Marshall wo wasureru, or Sarah Marshall wo wasurero, which literally means like forget Sarah Marshall, or forgetting Sarah Marshall, or you should forget Sarah Marshall. But instead it was Netorare Otoko no Rabu Bakansu. And bakansu, it means vacation. It's like from the French word vacances for vacation, but it's a little more than that in Japanese. It's like this like romantic, sexy kind of vacation, this like what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas kind of vacation. It has that kind of connotation to it, and it's pretty much exactly what his vacation was like. It wasn't just a vacation, I'm gonna go lie around on the beach and read books. It was more like he met someone new, it was exciting, it was sexy, stuff like that. And they love using the word bakansu in titles and in things, I've noticed. It's in a lot of stuff. Like my host mom in Japan, my first host mom, loved singing this song that had bakansu in the title. I forget what the whole thing was called, but yeah, it's a very like poetic word that they like using in titles, so it makes sense that they would take the opportunity to use that word in this title. Here is the next movie title, Love Song for an Angel. What movie do you think that is? It is Sister Act. A literal translation of this title would be Nisei Sister, which means like fake nun, fake sister, and they could have titled it that. But I think they chose to go with the more inspirational properties of this movie, how it is about, you know, a woman who came from the slums, and yeah, she had to pretend to be a nun, and haha, that's really funny, but in the end, like, she grows from that and she helps the convent grow from that. And instead of singing love songs in nightclubs, she is now singing love songs to God or to the angels. So going with the overarching theme of the movie, Tenshi ni love song wo, or like love song to an angel or love song to the angels, actually fits the movie pretty well, and it gives it a more inspirational feel to it versus just I'm a phony, I'm pretending to be a nun. I will follow him wherever he may go. Here's the next movie. Can you guess what Live for the Moment is? It is in fact Dead Poets Society. Seize the day I heard him say So a literal translation of ima wo ikiru is to like live for now, live for the moment. And this harkens back to the whole carpe diem, seize the day theme that comes out really early in this movie. And again, if you look at the overarching themes of the movie, it is about seizing the day, living in the moment. It's not necessarily so much about a dead poet's society. And ultimately, while the movie's like sad, it has some really tragic and sad stuff in there, it also can be seen as an inspirational call to action to, hey guys, live in the moment. So ima wo ikiru, or live in the moment, I think is a really good version, is a really good alternative title for this movie. Okay, here is the next movie, Romance Novelist. It is as good as it gets. Saw this movie years and years and years ago. I had to look it up again to see what it was about. But yeah, it's about a novelist who's very misanthropic and has OCD, and as a result, like, does not have any positive relationships in his life. And he's struggling. Then he meets Helen Hunt. Things happen, yada yada. Kind of feel good, comedy-ish, drama-ish movie. In this sense, I feel like the Japanese title really missed the mark. They just made it extremely generic, like romance novelist, or like the romance novelist would probably be how we would translate that translated title. As good as it gets, if you remember, it was a line in the movie, and that's kind of where they got the title from originally.
All I'm saying is, what if this is as good as it gets? There it is!
Romance novelist, to me, it just, I don't know, it's just very generic and doesn't really say much at all about the movie, and I don't know why they translated or localized it that way. There might be some deeper context in there. Here's the next movie. What do you think Lover's Omen is? It is, in fact, When Harry Met Sally. So a more literal translation of this title in Japanese, they have ways of saying when Harry met Sally or how Harry met Sally. They have a couple words actually that really work well for this concept. They have a couple words actually that work really well for this concept. Deai, which means an encounter, and it often means like a relationship's encounter beginning. And they also have naresome, which is a term that means like the story of how you guys met and fell in love. So it could have been called Hari to Sari no Naresome, or Hari to Sari no Deai. It could have been those titles, and that would have been a literal translation, and it would have worked just fine. But the thing that's kind of missing that we have in the English version that they would then not have in the Japanese version if they translated the title literally is the word when. When Harry met Sally, ... If the title of the movie were just Harry and Sally met, or Harry and Sally's meeting, or how Harry met Sally, which is kind of what Hari to Sari no Deai or Hari to Sari no Naresome would mean, it's that when that is really interesting in English, and you can't really capture it in Japanese with the literal translation. When Harry met Sally implies, okay, when Harry met Sally, something significant happened. Or when Harry met Sally, they didn't know that they were going to wind up being romantically involved. They thought, oh yeah, we're just going to be friends. Or when Harry met Sally, initially it was a botched, like, maybe we were going to have a relationship and then we didn't, and then years later something happened. It has a lot of places that it can go just from that one word, when. So that whole omen or premonition of lovers, koibito no yokan, it's like this sense that love is in the air is actually another good way to translate that. So it does have this sort of like anticipation, like, ooh, something is gonna happen feel to it that When Harry Met Sally also has because of the when. So I think that's a really good localization of the title for When Harry Met Sally.
Oh, yes, yes, yes!
Here's another movie, How to Begin Your Final Romance. It is, in fact, Hitch. Saw this movie once a long time ago. I don't really remember it well, but it's basically about a guy who like counsels, he's like a relationship guru, which helps people get married, because hitch is like hitched, to get married, slang in our language. So that title works pretty well in English, but in Japanese it would be something like kekkon, which means just marriage.
Marriage.
They don't exactly have anything like that, so instead they have a title that's very long and descriptive and basically just describes what the movie is about. Here's another movie, a very popular one from the 80s, Major Calamities PTA. That is Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. I do not know why they decided to add the PTA at the end of that. In fact, I think that's very misleading because in Japan they have a PTA, a Parent-Teacher Association. That's like a regular thing over there. So I think most people, when they would see PTA in the title, they would think it's about school or something. Major Calamities, though, that does describe the movie. So the movie's premise is a guy, he's just trying to get home to his family and he takes the plane, but it gets rerouted and he winds up having to take all these different methods of transport, planes, trains, and automobiles, and he's with John Candy the whole time, who's really annoying. And so the spirit of the film is, yeah, this is like a major disaster, like at every turn, Steve Martin runs into trouble. So the daisainan, or major calamities part, I think that's a pretty good localization of the movie, but PTA I don't get, and I don't know why they did that, and I think it's very confusing and misleading. Okay, the next three titles, because of a word in them, will probably give away what the title is. So the first one is Shawshank no Sora ni, or In Shawshank Skies. And yes, that is the Shawshank Redemption. So the theme of the Shawshank Redemption, it's about a man who is falsely accused of a crime and sent to Shawshank, this big prison. But while living in this prison, he gets redeemed somehow. I'm not gonna spoil the movie. If you haven't seen it, totally see it. It's a really good movie. But yeah, it's about finding freedom and redemption within prison, basically. So Shawshank no Sora ni, or In Shawshank's Skies, ... that kind of feel to it. It has this sort of freedom in the face of incarceration feel to it. So I think that's a really good translation of that movie title. They do have a word for redemption, but I think Shawshank no Sora ni, it sounds inspirational, and that's kind of what this movie is. It's like an it's a very sad, dark movie, but I think the message in the end is a little bit uplifting. Here's another movie that's probably going to be pretty easy to guess what the original movie was. The 50th First Kiss. It is indeed 50 First Dates. So I think the reason why they changed it from first date to first kiss is because fasto kisu, or first kiss, it is a very commonly used phrase, word, concept in Japanese, but fasto deito, not so much. So I think the only reason they changed it from first date to first kiss is just because first kiss is much more of a concept to them than first date is. And I think they made it the 50th first kiss instead of 50 first kisses to show that on the 50th one something happens. And that is what the movie is about. It's about a woman who has amnesia and this guy who's dating her, and he has to date her basically like 50 whole times, essentially, because she keeps forgetting him before something finally changes. And it's that change that we're interested in seeing. So I think that's why they changed it from like 50 first kisses to the 50th first kiss. And here's another title that should be easy to grasp. Crazy About Mary. Yeah, there's something about Mary. So, Mary ni kubittakke? Kubittakke means like to be crazy about someone. They actually kind of have a phrase for there's something about, and it's kininaru. It's like, kininaru na, like, that person, kininaru. It means like, there's just something about her, or there's just something about him. And there's usually a romantic, crushing sort of feel with kininaru. So they could have translated as kininaru Mary. And I think that would have been a more literal translation. But instead they just made it Crazy About Mary. And I think that is a little more accurate. And here are some titles where they kept the English, but they shortened it a little bit. One is Eternal Sunshine. It is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. So I think the reason why they did this is eternal and sunshine are words that they actually know. They're English words that they know, etanaru and sunshine. But of they kind of know too, but then spotless, they wouldn't know that. And then mind, they don't necessarily know either. And then if you have an English title that's just really super long like that, it's a little off-putting. So they shortened it to eternal sunshine. I don't like this though. The whole concept of eternal sunshine of the spotless mind is a guy who gives himself amnesia to forget about his ex-girlfriend who broke his heart. And that's the whole spotless mind thing. It's like there's no bad memories of her, so it's eternal sunshine now because there's no bad memories of her. Versus if you just have only eternal sunshine, to me it's just like eternally happy, woohoo! I don't know, I think it's a very misleading title. And I think they could have done better. I think they should have fully localized it into Japanese. Here's another movie, Gilbert Grape. So as you can easily guess, that's What's Eating Gilbert Grape. And so in this case, they just chose to go with the name of the main character of the movie, just Gilbert Grape. And I guess that was a fair enough title because the movie is a bit of a character study of Gilbert Grape and his relationships with those people around him.
Do you want to be in the video?
And in the original title of What's Eating Gilbert Grape, yeah, there's something a little off about Gilbert Grape. Like, yeah, he's in some pretty tough situations in his life. He has a special needs brother, and his mother is eating herself to death. And he's in this very small, backwards town. But at the same time, he's sort of like unjustifiably emo the whole time. So that's kind of where the What's Eating Gilbert Grape comes in. But ultimately, it's just more about Gilbert Grape, like a character study on him and this life around him and his relationships. So I think the title, Gilbert Grape, is totally fine. Could be wrong, it's been years since I've seen that movie. For the movie Good Will Hunting, they decided to keep that English title, Goodwill Hunting, and then they added kind of a little subtitle after that, Tabidachi. I really like this. I really like Tabidachi there as like a subtitle because Tabidachi means to journey forth or departure, but it has this like new me feel to it. I'm on a personal journey of growth kind of feel to it, and that's what Good Will Hunting is about, among many other things. The Lovers of Notting Hill is their version of Notting Hill. And I think that makes sense too, because Notting Hill, I mean, even to an American audience, I didn't know what Notting Hill was. Like, whenever I'd see that movie title pop up in Netflix, I'd be like, Nothing Hill! Like, Notting Hill didn't ring a bell to me. And then when I actually watched the movie, it's kind of boring. I discovered, oh, Notting Hill is a place. So adding The Lovers to Notting Hill in the Japanese title, I think makes it a clearer title. It shows that Notting Hill is a place and that it is a love story. It's about lovers. And yeah, it's those things. So I think that's a really good localized title. Here's one, Bernie's. Subtitle, Dangerous Weekend. Weekend at Bernie's. So basically the only information they're adding here is that it's dangerous or extreme is kind of another way you could translate abunai. And yeah, he's dead. I still haven't seen that movie. Like, I know totally what it's about, but yeah, it's about a guy who dies and people are having to like prop up his dead body to pretend that he's alive. So yeah, Weekend at Bernie's, just like the title by itself, it can sound quite benign. It's like, oh, let's go to Bernie's and let's sip tea and talk about socialized healthcare. Not like, oh no, this guy died and mayhem ensues because we have to animate his dead body. So adding the abunai in there was a good choice. Okay, so the next two movie titles are based off of certain actors' popularity in Japan. The first one is Jim Carrey is Mr. Dumber. This is a weird meta title for a movie because it's Dumb and Dumber, and yeah, Jim Carrey is the star in it, but there is no character in the movie called Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey is not in the movie at all. He's not in the story. But they have Jim Carrey is Mr. Dumber as the title of the movie because Jim Carrey was getting popular in Japan. And there's like, oh, you like Jim Carrey? Then you should see this movie where he plays a guy named Mr. Dumber. And it's like, Jim Carrey back then, before he evolved and started doing more serious stuff, that's what he was known for, was just really dumb, stupid slapstick comedy.
I'm Fire Marshal Bill Burns, and nobody likes a quitter. Scalpel!
Scalpel!
So So just saying, hey, Jim Carrey's in this movie, it's already telling people what kind of movie it is. So I think that was a pretty smart move on their part. I'm gonna close with a really interesting movie title from a movie that was coming out actually in Japan when I was living there. It had come out in America before I went there, so I had seen the trailers for it before I left, and then it was being released in Japan, you know, the Japanese version, the dubbed version, while I was there, so I got to see the trailers again in Japanese. This is what the movie's title was in Japanese: Pretty Bride. It was in fact Runaway Bride. And I remember when I was seeing the trailers for this, I was thinking, what? This is a complete mistranslation. Why did you call it Pretty Bride? And why is it in English too? Puriti braido. Like, why didn't you translate it into Japanese? Why is it Pretty Bride when it's supposed to be Runaway Bride? That's completely different. The whole premise of the movie is she's a commitment phobe and she runs away at the altar all the time. Not that she's pretty. However, later on, I learned that Pretty Woman, starring Julia Roberts, also very popular movie in Japan. So I think, again, that's a case where they were going to market this movie to people by saying, hey, remember Pretty Woman, that movie that has Julia Roberts? Remember how much you love Julia Roberts? Hey, this movie also has Julia Roberts because pretty. Only instead of a pretty woman, this time she is a pretty bride.
Pretty bride.
Walking down the street, pretty
bride.
the kind I like to meet, pretty
Bride.
So that's just an example of who the actor is influencing the Japanese version of the title. Anyway, the moral of the story is that localizing things versus translating things can sometimes produce completely different titles, completely different translations of things that are not like the original. But if you look at the subtext or the overall themes of the piece of work or the character in question, these localized titles that seem like they might be wrong are actually good. I hope to be breaking down some more localized things like this in the future. If you are bilingual, have you ever encountered an American movie that had a really weirdly localized title in the other language? Let me know. Bye-bye!